Mariah Rule was a general assignment reporter for the ABC affiliate station when she decided she wanted to be part of the world's greatest Navy. She went through officer candidate school in Pensacola, Florida, and was commissioned in 2000. Upon commission, she began flight training and was selected to enter the E-2C Hawkeye pipeline. She reported to Tiger Tails of VAW 125 immediately, went on deployment aboard the aircraft carrier USS George Washington, and again on the USS John F. Kennedy, commanding the skies of both Afghanistan and Iraq in the war against terrorism. Ashore, Commander Rule was honored to be selected and trained as a Level 5 Weapons and Tactics instructor. In 2005, she was the second woman to complete the Top Gun AIC course. She also married my dad that year. In 2008, I was born. A year later, my mom returned to sea for her department head tour with Seahawks of VHW 126. She completed a deployment on the USS Harry S. Truman, again flying over Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf. She also completed a tour aboard the Navy's newest aircraft carrier, USS Gerald R. Ford, as a strike operations officer. She most recently was the executive officer in the Navy base in Sasebo, Japan, that is home to 8,000 Americans who serve there. She retired on September 1st of this year and now works at the Marine Corps to introduce 21st century equipment to the fleet. Commander Rule is married to Captain Ethan Rule, a surface warfare officer and commanding officer of the USS America. Please welcome my mother, Mariah Rule.
Thank you, Amelon. I think maybe she just got used to seeing me out of uniform because I just retired September 1st, and this is the first time I've worn it since September 1st, and it still fills me with a lot of pride. I was in the Navy for more than 25 years. Back then, in 1999, I was a bureau chief in Jacksonville, North Carolina, home of most of the East Coast Marine Corps, and I was covering a trial of a Marine Corps pilot who clipped a ski gondola cable in Aviano, Italy, which killed 20 people. Being there amongst world-class journalists and a mishap that balanced world-class service inspired me to join the Navy myself, to be part of something larger. I wanted to stop talking about the news and do something about it. So I did. I joined the Navy in 1999. So this was post-Cold War. The U.S. was the only superpower, and honestly, it was an easy time to join. Most of the American public looked at the United States Navy and the military overall as one of the most prestigious organizations within the government, or so say the Gallup polls. Those who joined around me became my best friends. We joined a winning team. We joined to accelerate our lives. At least that was the motto in 1999 to 2001. And that undercurrent of excellence and teamwork was the reason I served for 25 years. I also said that I would get out as soon as it wasn't fun anymore, so every time I came up for orders, I wanted to know if it was going to be fun, and it really turned out to be a lot of fun. I joined for the feeling to be a part of something bigger, and I stayed for 25 years because of the camaraderie and the personal feeling of the people all around me, bound together by a call to defend American values. I became a naval flight officer in the E-2C Hawkeye, and I earned my wings of gold on September 14th, 2001, just 3 days after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11th. I had already finished my last flights to get my wings, which means I'd gone through all of the prerequisites, and all I had to do was go through the ceremony. I'd finished a couple days before this, but several of my classmates had not. They still had a couple more winging flights to do. After September 11th, the skies were clear. Nothing was flying. But the Navy got special permission for some of my classmates to finish their winging flights so that we could get our wings and be sent to the fleet. So my boyfriend, who later became my husband and Amelon's dad, was on the USS Baton, and they were sent to sea immediately, right straight to New York Harbor, as one of the largest hospital ships that the United States had to be ready for that. Those terrorist attacks shaped my entire naval career. Shortly after winging, I joined my fleet squadron. We went on to my first deployment aboard the USS George Washington, commanding the skies over Afghanistan. We were given handguns right before we launched, and we took off all of our patches of our flight suits before launching. Almost all of us earned air medals. that deployment. There's a closeness that develops between those that deploy together in a wartime, flying over hostile territory, or even if you're just stuck at sea with somebody. I imagine it's a lot like St. George's folks that are here for 4 years. But anytime you are bound together with someone through something, you feel a special closeness with them. And this was true for me as well. And the entire country supported us. George Bush had a 90% approval rating at the time. Unity really defined the time. 2 years later, we deployed again, and this time the theater of operations in Afghanistan was much more mature. We had a lot more stringent set of rules and objectives, and in 2004, when we arrived in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf on the John F. Kennedy, we had just gotten the 500-pound JDAM bomb certified for use on board the aircraft carrier. Previous to this, we only had the 1,000-pound version of the JDAM. So this was an exciting development for us because collateral damage was one of the most important things around us. And the 1,000-pound bomb, too much bomb for the collateral damage requirements of the time. Before this, we did have 500-pound bombs, but they were laser-guided. The package on the bomb was a laser-guided munition, which meaning somebody on the ground or another aircraft had to laze the target, which introduced air, and that air was unacceptable. It was too high, and so we were only allowed to use GPS munition. So we got this 500-pound GPS-guided bomb, and all of a sudden we could execute with a lot more precision, a lot more reliability, and a lot more accuracy. This type of military restraint and metered responses was understood by all of us in theater, even when the Air Force, who got that 500-pound bomb before us, was taking up all of our missions because we didn't have the smaller bomb yet. Collateral damage assessments were central in achieving our strategic objectives in the area. We needed to make sure that our bombs hit only the specific target, and that strategic picture was never lost on us. If we lost the hearts and minds of the Iraqis, our mission was lost, and we understood that. We talked about it in ready rooms, and in every theater we had JAGs, the lawyers that determine with the regional commanders the amount of risk that we're allowed to take in order to stay within the bounds of international law. If we're there to enforce international law and bring order and discipline to everyone in the area, we'd better always act within the confines of the law. The rules of engagement were briefed and debriefed and thoroughly understood prior to launch. In a theater like this, you rely on so many people around you to get those kinds of answers. The trust in everyone to be the best and to know their job better than anyone else forged a closeness amongst us that was hard to describe. Maintainers of the aircraft, the parachute riggers in case you had to jump out, the lawyers to make sure you were acting within the confines of the law, the analysts to make sure that our intel was sound, the targeteers who provided these giant packs of targets to every aircraft. We'd launch these big things, and when collateral damage assessments were met for any of these targets, we could strike. Collateral damage assessment in an urban environment defined how we flew then. The United States went to great lengths to protect unnecessary loss of life and be right about who was part of the insurgency and who wasn't. It was also the first time that we used unmanned drones. The Predator was used for intelligence gathering. The Predator is an unmanned drone that can fly for more than a dozen hours, more now, up at altitude. The cameras that it streamed back to the ship were the first streaming capability that we had, monitoring when and where people were. It was always streaming in the intel spaces on the ship. Much like an addictive TikTok video, we called it predator porn because the analysts were always staring at it. And we trusted them. When we woke up at 2 a.m. for the 3 a.m. briefs, we knew that they were telling us exactly what was going on and where, so we could be on station when and where we needed to be. And we flew into the late hours of the night. A few months in, I was sent off the ship to be the Navy's liaison in Qatar. We were in the final stages of planning the second battle for Fallujah, which meant this could be the end of the war and maybe a major turning point in Iraq. While in Qatar, I was selected to be on the command and control briefing team. So me and a group of 3 other people traveled around Iraq to brief the procedures that we would use for calling in close air support during that battle to support the Marines on the ground. In the Marine Corps, aviation is really just considered like airborne artillery. So when you get a lot of jets and a lot of Marines in a close proximity to each other, your procedures had better be tight, and ours were. We traveled mostly around Iraq late at night by helicopter when it was deemed to be the safest. And one of the Marines told me to take off my bulletproof jacket and sit on it because we were taking fire from the ground. So I did that. There weren't a lot of women in Iraq on the front line there. And so a lot of times when we traveled around, we'd be in these huge transient tents, except I would be the only one in there. Especially in Ramadi, it was tough to get a good night's sleep because of the frequent fighting. Up to this point, really the only shots that I had seen fired were from 25,000 feet from video from an F-14 or an FA-18. So the first time I saw shots fired at night, I saw it from the view that was under my cot, surrounded by sandbags in this huge transient tent all by myself, because they told me to get underneath the cot if you heard anything. So I did. And the first time, it really looked like Star Wars laser guns were shooting, but they weren't on Star Wars, and this wasn't a movie. After the fight was over, someone would always come and check on me, but I was really glad to be back to this perceived safety of my floating city at sea of the USS John F. Kennedy and launch off the front of it to support the men and women on the ground. Even more proud when my jets from the JFK protected Marines and took out dangerous targets. After this, I felt a close connection to our Marine Corps team, and I understand that part of teamwork was there to support him. On my third deployment, many of my female peers had separated from military service, so all of a sudden, I was a senior female on a ship of 5,000. Amlon was 2. And I'm looking around for my female peers, and I really didn't have any, but the benefit was that I got my own room. But having my own room and being on my own was the opposite of what I really liked about the Navy, so that was a much different feel than the first time. You'll find that no matter what field you go into, as you get more and more senior, your peer group gets smaller and smaller. It just happened to me much earlier than my male peers. I still felt an outstanding connection and a reliance on the team, but it was a little different to be the only senior-ish mom doing that. I still enjoyed seeing the junior officers bonding the same ways that I had. Anytime an aircraft carrier pulls into an oversized port, it's a huge deal. And ingrained into all of us always is that we are ambassadors to America. Everything we did, from pulling into a foreign port to the way we behaved on those ports, was to build partnerships so we weren't alone. Likewise, when I was the executive officer in Sasebo, Japan, at our base there, I gave the ambassador speech frequently to my junior sailors. The homogeneous ethnicity of Japan means that Americans stick out even more than we usually do, so we relied on the teamwork of shipmates to take care of each other as an example of what an American is and what an American does. So it's very strange to stand up here 25 years after being in the Navy and not be in the Navy, but be here as a retired veteran, telling just a couple of my sea stories to honor the veterans of 250 years of the Navy and 250 years of the Marine Corps and Army as well. Our founding was actually October 13th, 250 years ago, but the United States Navy was actually founded twice. The first time, the famous one, October 13th, 1775, was out of necessity, revolutionary necessity, when we had a juicy British target only available by sea. On that day, the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia voted to fit out 2 sailing vessels with 10 guns each to intercept the British transports carrying military supplies. The Continental Navy was completely disbanded, however, in 1785. The 50-ish ragtag ships were sold off, sailors and officers were dismissed, and for 9 years, the United States didn't have a naval force. Americans still had a very deep skepticism of standing armies being used against our people. Once we came to terms with it in the Constitution and it was ratified in 1789, it granted Congress power to provide and maintain an army. However, it wasn't until March 27, 1794 that George Washington signed the Act to provide naval armament that authorized the construction of 6 powerful frigates and created the permanent United States Navy. Those 6 ships were the highest standard of the time. The second founding is actually when the USS Constitution, still in the Boston Harbor now, was commissioned. The story of our founding set the tone for our naval power, an apolitical force designed not for conquest, but for defending liberty and commerce, a global force for good. America's Navy, forged from the sea. Those are the other things throughout my naval career that the Navy hang their head as a mantra. We're still forged by the sea. Historians, and maybe even you here at SG, will research, read, analyze, debate, and think about the actions we took in the military and the conflicts that I was involved in for the past 25 years and those that the Navy has been a part of for the past 250. Some were based on right, some were based on, and some were actually right, and some were based on right, but went wrong. I hope you study all of our naval strategies and all of our actions, how we did and how we do and how we are as a nation. Thinking, debating, listening, coming to a compromise and reflecting is about the most patriotic thing that we can do. Doing so truly honors the sacrifice of 250 years of veterans and embraces unity, cherishes freedom, and stands for justice of all. Thank you all so much for having me today. It has been my honor to talk to you. Godspeed.